Wow.
Yeah, I was in, once I went to South Africa, I went to a famous site there, this Sterkfontein Caves, which has now become a United Nations World Heritage Site. And the reason the place is famous is because in the 1950s and 60s, some fossils of Australopithecus were discovered there. As I said, now it's a United Nations World Heritage Site, and hundreds of thousands of tourists visit the place. And when you go, before you go into the Sterkfontein Caves, you have to go through a museum. And when you walk into the museum, there's a big sign that says, "Discover yourself."
Huh.
And the first thing you see when you walk into the museum is this big quote from Richard Dawkins, the one I just gave you. If you want to know what you are, that's what you are.
Wow.
But I thought we were human resources.
Huh?
I thought we were human resources.
Well, we're also that, because you have to be used for a certain purpose. But the Vedic philosophy is proposing something else. We're something more than that. Now, and the supporters of that idea would say, okay, our consciousness, that's just a byproduct of bioelectrical activity in the brain. It produces consciousness, but only temporarily and only in association with the brain. But the Vedic idea is aham brahmasmi. I am an eternally existing conscious self. Matter does not produce consciousness, but consciousness can become associated with matter. And if it does, then its business is to disassociate itself from matter and restore itself to its original pure state by different processes of yoga and meditation. So, in my presentations to the scientific world, on that question, that particular question, I try to introduce them to different categories of evidence that tend to show there is a conscious self that can exist apart from the body, apart from the brain. And there are several areas of such research. Medical studies of out-of-body experiences or near-death experiences, as they're sometimes called, psychiatric studies of past life memories that show that a conscious self can move from one material embodiment to another. So there are some categories of evidence like that. So that is what I have tried to do in terms of introducing Vedic concepts of human origins and human nature into scientific discussion. And of course, it's going against, the trend, you could say. So, but I have been able to, as I say, present papers on these topics at gatherings of anthropologists, archaeologists, scientists involved in consciousness studies. And as I was mentioning a little bit earlier, my latest book, My Science, My Religion, is a collection of 24 papers that I've been able to present at major international scientific conferences on these topics. The idea of extreme human antiquity, which is there in the Vedas, the idea that the human form has always been available for conscious selves to occupy on this level of reality. So, and then this idea that as conscious beings we have not evolved up from matter, rather we have devolved or come down from the level of pure consciousness into the world of matter. That's the topic of my book, Human Devolution, a Vedic alternative to Darwin's theory. We didn't evolve up from matter, we've devolved or come down from the level of pure consciousness or spirit. We've associated ourselves with matter. The purpose of human life, according to the Vedas, is to disassociate the conscious self from its contact with matter, where it is limited in many different ways. In its normal condition, the conscious self is Sat Chidananda Vigraha. Sat means it's eternally existing, Chit means it's full of knowledge, Ananda means it's full of spiritual pleasure. When the conscious self becomes associated with matter and occupies material forms, those material forms are temporary, they're not full of knowledge, they're not full of ever-increasing spiritual bliss. So we feel uncomfortable in this situation. So, I'm trying to introduce some of these ideas into scientific discussion. And I think that's the reason why I think it's important, is because our whole worldwide human civilization today is structured on the basis of other ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, sometimes we're defined as machines made of matter in competition with each other for survival. That's a very dominant idea. And our conception of the self is very important. It's on that basis that we determine our goals, our values, individually and collectively. And I think because for the past few centuries, we've tended to define ourselves in very materialistic ways, that our goals have become extremely materialistic. And we think that to produce and consume more and more material things is the main purpose of human existence. Produce and consume more and more material things in competition with others who are also trying to do the same thing, and therefore we've divided ourselves into so many competing groups. And in the process, we are destroying our planet, we're poisoning the air, poisoning the land, poisoning the water, we've divided ourselves into competing groups to compete for the control of material resources like oil and so many others. We've divided ourselves into so many competing economic groups, and there's a tremendous amount of conflict on all levels of human society in terms of individuals, classes, nations, even among religions. So I think part of the solution to that is coming to understand that we're all beings of pure consciousness. We're not machines made of matter in competition with each other for survival. We're all beings of pure consciousness. We're all related to each other. We shouldn't be dividing ourselves into competing groups on the basis of superficial designations of race, nationality, religion, and so on. And we should be trying to satisfy our material needs in the most simple, natural, and efficient way possible, rather than trying to maximize our consumption of material resources for the temporary financial benefit of whoever is benefiting from that process. So I think there's a lot at stake into how we define ourselves from the scientific point of view and the philosophical point of view. So those are some remarks that kind of explain, what I'm trying to do. and why, in terms of introducing some Vedic concepts into the world of science. Many people today think you have to keep the things totally separate. You know, science is on this side, religion is on this side, and you can't mix them. But actually, many of the most famous scientists did bring their spiritual insight and perspectives into their scientific work. And there is I'd say, although for the past few centuries there was an attempt to try to completely separate these things and leave out the more subtle and spiritual aspects of reality. That was a process that began in Western science about 5 or 6 centuries ago, where they gradually began to exclude from their scientific picture of reality different subtle forces and energies and spiritual things, and any idea of intelligent kind of oversight or control of any of this, and they just decided to focus on ordinary matter operating according to mathematically describable laws. It was very productive for science in one sense, because they were able to develop a good understanding that enabled them to produce many things that society wanted, like weapons, pharmaceuticals, consumer products. So it was very productive for science in that way, but it was at the expense of a radically narrowed conception of reality that left out a lot of things. And I think because of that, although there has been a tremendous amount of technical and scientific progress, we also see there are a lot of problems that have arisen from that, which could possibly be dealt with by, reintegrating a lot of these other aspects of reality so that we have a more complete and holistic picture of who we are and where we should be going. So, I think I'll stop here.
We have, first of all, I want to thank everybody that made it here through the traffic. And why don't we carry on now that we have more of an assembly. I know some of you have some questions, and try to bring out, the most difficult questions you have for Drew DeCarma and Mikael Cremo, and put him to the test to justify his position of saying that there's a hidden history of the human race here that knowledge is being filtered out of the society by other people so that we're not aware of what the truth is.
I'll let you conduct the session.
Okay.
Go ahead. I have two questions, please. Earlier in the talk, you were discussing about matter and antimatter and some imbalance that was taking place, which then gave rise to something else.
I'm saying that's the scientific,
right?
That's not necessarily the Vedic
cosmological.
I understand.
So what is there under? What do they define as being antimatter? What is that thing?
It's like, as the word says, they believe that virtual particles are formed from some vast sea of energy, and they exist in paired form, matter and antimatter, and they cancel each other out. That's basically what they say.
Okay.
They don't say it's like a spiritual thing, it's just two aspects of the same thing.
Okay.
Some people, if I say antimatter, you might think, well, it means spiritual.
Right.
That's not their conception.
Okay.
It's just dual aspects of matter, antimatter, and they can cancel each other out.
Okay.
But then why do we have a world of matter then?
I see. They
They
should have canceled it.
They should have all canceled out, but because there's a slight this is what I'm told by astrophysicists who accept this view, that there's a slight imbalance that results in some ordinary matter existing, and that's results in our universe or
Is that,
universes.
does that amount to that singularity?